Hey guys! So, welcome to another edition of Last Week I Watched, where I just talk about the movies I watched in the previous week. I only had time to watch 2 movies this week. It was a very busy week. I was traveling to see some family, and then after that I was helping out a friend on a film production. So, I haven't had time really to watch many movies. Also, I've been on the road, and when I go on the road, I like to bring my camera with me and my sound with me. And I haven't had time to reassemble it in my studio, hence why the video looks like this week. I apologize for all that, but without further ado, let's talk about the 2 movies I saw this week, the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent and Gimme Shelter. So, let's start with the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. This is the latest Nicolas Cage movie from a director I was pretty unfamiliar with, but the Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is about Nicolas Cage playing himself. He's a little down on his luck. The movie roles aren't coming in like they used to. He thinks about quitting acting. He's having trouble with his family. And all of a sudden, he takes up this deal to meet with a millionaire who wants to produce a movie script. And he slowly finds out that this millionaire is up to more nefarious things, so he teams up with the CIA to take him down. It's a very Nicolas Cagey premise to a movie. We've seen this done before. We've seen it in movies like This Is the End, where a celebrity kind of plays themselves, but I think this one does it in a way that's more reflective, in my opinion. I just want to start off by talking about the title of this movie. The box office of this movie is doing a little poorly right now, and I can kind of understand why. Nicolas Cage has a pretty spotty track record. He has been hitting some home runs lately. I loved Color Out of Space. I loved Mandy. I loved, what else has he done? Kick-Ass was quite a bit ago. Pig. A lot of people liked Pig. I wasn't into Pig as much as most, but I will admit he gave a fantastic performance in Pig. So I feel like the name Nicolas Cage doesn't have that much of a draw compared with what it used to be. However, I feel like The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is a horrible name for a movie. This movie should have just been called The Massively Talented Nicolas Cage, or Nicolas Cage the Movie. Just put the name Nicolas Cage in the title of the movie, because I don't think people realized that Nicolas Cage was going to play himself in this movie. I don't think a lot of people saw the trailer where it was obvious that Nicolas Cage was playing himself. So just some kind of indication to the audience, wow, this is a movie where Nicolas Cage is playing himself. And if they would have just called it Nicolas Cage the Movie, I think a lot more people would have tuned in to watch this movie. It would have kind of became a meme on the internet, and then people would have wanted to check this movie out. This is an action thriller comedy. It was really reminiscent of another Seth Rogen directed movie, The Interview. It really shared a lot with The Interview. It's about this guy who has to kill this millionaire. In The Interview was Kim Jong-un, I believe, or Il, one of those two. And in this movie, it's this drug cartel guy. And Nicolas Cage kind of forms a bond with the person he's supposed to kill. The story itself isn't all that original. It's basically any secret agent comedy. However, it does bring in some good bits in here. I'll name a few. I don't want to spoil the movie too much. There's a bit in here involving drug humor. I don't usually like drug humor in movies because it always resorts to throwing in wacky stuff into the camera, wacky visual effects, which is not really what taking a drug feels like. Not that I speak from experience. I would never touch illicit substances. We don't promote illicit substances here on Garage Movie Club. Anyway, but yeah, the drug scene in here had me howling in laughter because it was so realistic. It really felt like these two characters were on drugs, and the camera doesn't do anything too weird, doesn't get too flashy. It keeps it really grounded, and it's solely reliant on the performances of Pedro Pascal and Nicolas Cage. So that whole LSD drug sequence was hilarious. There's a part in here where Nicolas Cage disguises himself and tries to play another character. That probably had my hardest laugh in the whole movie. And there are some really good Nicolas Cage freak-out moments like you would expect from a Nicolas Cage movie. Like I said, this is a movie like This Is the End where the actor is playing a version of himself. And I feel like it's a trope that's been done before. We've seen it numerous times. We've seen it in that Ali Wong movie recently where Keanu Reeves kind of plays himself. And whenever you get that in a movie, it always goes one of two extremes. You either have something like This Is the End, where Seth Rogen is basically playing a version of himself that's pretty accurate to what the audience expects from what Seth Rogen is in real life. But then you have movies like that Ali Wong movie where Keanu Reeves is just playing the total opposite of what you would expect. He's playing a complete douchebag. And in This Is the End, you had Michael Cera playing a complete douchebag as well. The comedy comes from Michael Cera, and Keanu Reeves are nothing like that in real life. So that's where the humor comes in. In this one, I feel like it was a bit more reflective. Nicolas Cage played himself, and judging by the title of this movie, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, I thought this movie would kind of be Nicolas Cage patting himself on the back or something like that. Nicolas Cage in this movie is not afraid to be critical of himself. He criticizes himself for sometimes taking his art too seriously. It sometimes becomes harmful to his surroundings, harmful to his family, and Nicolas Cage tries to justify the reason why he makes so many trashy red box movies. And he does portray himself as someone who's a little too attached to his ego. He's not afraid to go into these places that an actor feels like, oh, that's gonna kind of ruin my image. Nicolas Cage doesn't care. He really takes this movie to reflect on his career and on his public persona. So for that, I thought this movie was pretty interesting. His chemistry with Pedro Pascal, fabulous. I thought that was really funny. Any moment where those two are interacting, it kind of became like a buddy movie, kind of like something you would see in the early 2000s. Kind of became like a buddy stoner movie. There's a scene in here, I'm not spoiling this one because it's in the trailer, but there's a scene in here where Nicolas Cage and Pedro Pascal are just watching Paddington 2, and I thought that was pretty funny. It kind of reminded me of just like a chill buddy movie. The problem I have with this movie is especially its bland style. It's very bland looking. The camera is not doing anything too special. There's some scenes where the lighting is really bad. There's a scene where Nicolas Cage is in an underground tunnel, and you can barely see what's going on. There's action sequences going on, but everything just feels so dark, and you can't really see what's going on. There's some moments in here that the editing felt a little wonky. There's a moment in here where Nicolas Cage is kidnapped by the CIA, and they tell him what his mission is, and just in snapping a finger, no reluctance to the situation, Nicolas Cage is all of a sudden in a tuxedo, and it becomes this kind of James Bondy sequence. Also, the ending where Nicolas Cage takes out the bat, all of a sudden that's like concluded really oddly, in my opinion. Some weird editing choices, probably due to trying to shorten that runtime, but it was jarring nonetheless. One thing that really bothered me about this movie is that it is an R-rated comedy. And I remembered the interview. A lot of people didn't like the interview. I actually really enjoyed the interview. The interview was pretty violent. There was that whole graphic scene of Kim Jong-un burning up. And Nicolas Cage, especially in recent years, his movies have been very graphically violent. Color Out of Space was a very gory movie. Mandy was a very gory movie. The poster of that movie is Nicolas Cage holding a chainsaw with his face covered with blood. Kick-Ass is a very gory movie. Nicolas Cage has been associated, at least in my head, with very violent movies, especially in recent years. And this movie just lacked a lot of violence, and I felt like there was no weight to the action. And I feel like had this movie gone a little more over the top with its violence, maybe have a scene where Nicolas Cage reacts to the real life violence compared to fictionalized violence that he's more used to in filming his movies. That could have made for some comedy, but it also would have heightened the stakes and made me a little more invested in this plot. Another thing that kind of annoyed me in this movie is the fact that you have big name celebrities like Neil Patrick Harris, Ike Barinholtz, Tiffany Haddish, and they're not playing themselves, and it kind of confused me. When we're first introduced to Neil Patrick Harris, I'm like, okay, is Neil Patrick Harris supposed to be himself, or is he, oh, he's the agent, okay. And Tiffany Haddish, why is she for the CIA? Oh, she's a completely different character. I kind of wish that they cast unknowns. And the unknowns in this movie do a pretty good job. The main antagonist movie is relatively unknown, and he does a pretty good job. I wish that the only known character was Nicolas Cage, and that would have made it easier for my brain to process anything. That's a bit more of a nitpick, I will admit, but yeah, it still distracted me from the movie nonetheless. Lastly, I thought this movie was a little unfocused. There were some things that were brought up that were never really resolved or kind of just forgotten about. Nicolas Cage interacts with a younger version of himself in his imagination, and the younger version of himself is constantly saying, take the big budget movies, just do it. And it is funny for someone who's never seen the movie adaptation, but I thought it was pretty derivative of adaptation. In adaptation, Nicolas Cage plays a screenwriter, and he has a twin who's also played by Nicolas Cage, and the twin is constantly telling him to make more blockbuster spectaculars, while the other twin wants to make more serious independent dramas. And that's funny in the context of this movie because the younger Nicolas Cage is arguably the more Redbox Nicolas Cage. But nonetheless, I've seen it done before. Not only have I seen it done before, but I've seen it done before with Nicolas Cage. So that was a little distracting as well. That said, those scenes were funny. And those were the scenes where Nicolas Cage had the most freakouts. You're Nicolas motherfucking Cage! I can't do it any justice. But yeah, I really wanted to like this movie. This movie had a lot going for it. I'm a huge Nicolas Cage fan. Not as Redbox shit, obviously. I don't really tune into that. But I just like Nicolas Cage. You know, Nicolas Cage, he does his job and he gets the fuck out. I can respect it. And he's a real film fan, you know? He's a real film aficionado. Even in a movie like Kick-Ass, where his performance is so over the top, but he's paying tribute to the 1960s Batman. You gotta respect it, you know? He's a man who respects the craft of filmmaking, which is why I wanted to like this movie so much. Unfortunately, it was a little bland in its presentation, and I feel like the concept of the movie, of having Nicolas Cage play himself in an action movie, was a bit squandered. I did want the movie to make the premise a little more justified, and I wanted to see it make a perfect landing. Unfortunately, it kind of stumbles its way through. I did enjoy watching the movie, and I will say, too, that I went to see this with a friend. My friend was really skeptical to watch this, like a fucking Nicolas Cage movie. My friend is a more mainstream film fan. He doesn't know of movies like Mandy and Color Out of Space. But, dude, he was laughing consistently throughout this movie. And his enjoyment for the movie made me enjoy the movie a little more. You know, sometimes you go to a movie. Sometimes I go to the movies with my sister. My sister has a big old wet blanket sometimes, and she'll be like huffing and puffing the whole way. Oh, when is this gonna end? Takes out her phone to check the time, you know, that kind of thing. And it felt good to watch a movie with someone who was appreciating the movie. I feel like this movie does have mass appeal to it. Unfortunately, as someone who's a bit more of a niche Nicolas Cage fan, this didn't really scratch that itch I was expecting it to scratch. Yeah, for those reasons, some choppy editing, some bland cinematography, some bland presentation. Another action comedy in the same vein, the movie Brothers Grimsby with Sacha Baron Cohen. Now, is that an amazing movie? No, but you watch the movie Brothers Grimsby, and it's the same kind of thing. It's about this schlubby guy played by Sacha Baron Cohen who gets recruited for MI6, I believe, or some secret agent service. But that movie really felt like Sacha Baron Cohen. Like the scene where they go in an elephant's vagina, I'm like, that's so Sacha Baron Cohen. Or the scene where Donald Trump gets AIDS, I'm like, that's so Sacha Baron Cohen. And I think what I was wanting from this movie was a bit more of an identity. Something to make me say, that's so Nicolas Cage. And this movie didn't really offer that. Neither from the Nicolas Cage perspective or from a directing perspective. So that's just kind of how I feel about it. By no means is this a bad movie. I enjoyed it. I was never bored watching this movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. But as far as like repeat watches, I don't see myself really watching this one again. But This movie has like an 88 on Rotten Tomatoes, and deservedly so. It's the kind of movie I like to see succeed. It's something that's truly original. Yeah. Hopefully I didn't piss off too many Nicolas Cage fans on the internet with that review. Next, let's jump into Gimme Shelter. Ooh, a storm is threatening. That was awful. So, Gimme Shelter, I'm actually preparing for a Rolling Stones themed video. I say that every episode, but on the back burner, I have an Amadeus video coming up, and I'm working on a Rolling Stones video, but that one's going to take a lot longer to make because it's more involved, and I'm doing a ton of research for it. But anyway, I decided to watch Gimme Shelter to inform myself a bit more about the Rolling Stones, and this one follows the famous Free Altamont concert that took place. For those of you who don't know, the Free Altamont concert, it was supposed to be a follow-up to Woodstock, in spirit, not in name. And a lot of people thought that this was going to blow up. It was right in the height of the hippie movement, so a lot of people were excited to see this concert, and it was free, so it was very accessible. They were going to do this concert in a abandoned racetrack. So the movie starts off, and apparently when they started directing this documentary, they wanted it to be a very straightforward Rolling Stones concert film, something like Ladies and Gentlemen, the Rolling Stones, or in more recent years there was Shine a Light, which was the Martin Scorsese one. They wanted to make something along the lines of that, but catastrophic events happened at the Free Altamont concert that kind of changed the direction of the documentary, which kind of makes documentary filmmaking really cool to me. It's the fact that you can start with your subject and all of a sudden your subject deviates so far from what it's supposed to be that you just kind of go with the flow and hope you get something that's mildly entertaining in the midst of it. Throughout this whole documentary, I was thinking about another documentary, which was the Woodstock 99 documentary that came out last year on HBO, which was abysmal in my opinion. And this documentary deals with very similar subject matter to the Woodstock 99 documentary, but does it way better. Like, not even a comparison. First of all, Woodstock 99 was not subtle in the least bit. This one had a bit more subtlety to it. And it kind of had this encompassing theme of, well, the Rolling Stones are known to be these very outrageous people. They are known to take heavy drugs. They are known to trash hotel rooms. They are known to do a bunch of this kind of behavior. But for some reason, society is a lot more lenient when the Rolling Stones do it because it's the Rolling Stones. They're rock stars. But then what happens when that behavior propagates to the concert goers all of a sudden becomes not very acceptable? That's kind of like the feel I picked up from this documentary, and it really had me think about, why do we allow this behavior from rock stars, and when does it go too far when it goes into the audience? That's what I thought was very interesting. This movie is very subdued. It's very naturalistic. It's very cinema verite, pardon my French. And it's just the Stones going about this very disastrous concert. The movie opens, actually, and we see the Rolling Stones performing live, and Mick Jagger gets punched in the face on stage, and he just keeps going, and it's going, wow. Those concerts were rowdy, motherfucker. And then it just gets worse by the time halfway through the movie they start showing the Altamont Free concert. And that one is just brutal to get through. And it doesn't just focus on the Rolling Stones. You get other performers in here as well. Jefferson Airplane was in there, or Starship. I don't know which one it was, Jefferson Airplane or Starship. I don't know which one they were at the time. And you had other performers there as well. And it was just watching this whole catastrophic concert go down. And the Altamont Free concert had a lot less shit going on compared to the Woodstock 99 concert. But the way this documentary was presented, the shit that went down in the Altamont Free concert, just by looking at the documentaries, had a lot more gravity to it. It felt like a lot more like, oh, fuck, you know? Woodstock 99 had literally people swimming in shit, but that documentary didn't really make me feel anything because it kept cutting away to someone talking to the camera, giving their philosophical opinion on why Limp Bizkit is racist or some random shit like that. This one just showed the facts and had enough confidence in its viewers to make some connections as to what is going on. Just scenes of audience members going on dangerous scaffolding. You're like, oh my god, what are they fucking doing? And I'm gonna spoil the documentary, but you can't really spoil a documentary because it's real events. But it all ends up with the Rolling Stones going on stage and someone in the audience unfortunately gets stabbed to death. And this movie kind of has a framing device where it starts off with the Rolling Stones watching the concert go down, and so you're kind of watching it at the same time as the Rolling Stones are watching it. And when that moment goes down, we cut back to Mick Jagger watching the footage in an editing room and just reacting to it and seeing that fucking gut punch in Mick Jagger, feeling like that, oh fuck. It really packed a punch. And then they're replaying it frame by frame in front of Mick Jagger and seeing the knife. That's very hard to see, but you can kind of see it. It kind of felt very found footage-y, which made it all the more hard to watch. I thought this was a really solid documentary. Do I think it's the best music documentary ever made? No, and this is hailed as a classic. It's available on Criterion Blu-ray. It's a very important piece of culture from the 1970s, but it's a very plainly shot documentary, but very effective at what it does. It really gives you that gut punch, and I enjoyed this documentary very much. Guys, thanks for tuning in. Sorry for the more lo-fi feel of this week's episode, but tell me, guys, in the comments below, what movies have you watched last week? Let's get a discussion going. I'll be replying to your comments.